Animals sometimes behave incredibly. This stray cat came to the store with a tree leaf in his teeth, and when the seller found out the reason, he was really stunned. Joe had been selling the choicest fish in his shop for many years, and the whole neighborhood knew the kind seller. One day, a small stray cat appeared next to Joe's store, who just sat and watched for hours as people came in for fresh fish, and then came back out with purchases in their hands. So the whole day passed, which was incredibly busy for Joe, and the next morning the stray cat returned and immediately ran up to the seller, holding a tree leaf in his teeth. Joe just smiled, but did not react in any way to the baby, who, not wanting to just leave, jumped on the counter and put the leaf right in front of the seller. At first, the man was confused, but then he finally figured out what was going on. It turns out that the homeless pet was very smart, and watching the customers, he saw more than once how they gave the seller some pieces of paper and received fish in return. Naturally, the cat did not know what money was, and decided that a tree leaf would be an excellent means of payment for a tasty morsel. This touched Joe's heart so much that he cut off a small piece of fish and gave it to the animal, which immediately disappeared around the nearest corner. Of course, the cat returned the very next day, carefully clutching another leaf in his teeth, which became a real jewel for him. Joe did not chase the quick-witted pet away and again gave him a small treat as a reward. Since then, the pet came to the good merchant's shop every day with its unusual means of payment in its teeth. And Joe never refused the kid a little treat. The seller even named the sushi cat, who became one of his favorite guests. Joe also put a small cup of fresh water for the pet at the entrance to the store, next to which a small piece of fish appeared every day, which disappeared by the end of the day, and instead of it, sushi always left a leaf of a tree. One day, when Joe had a busy day, and the store was full of customers, the owner only noticed in the evening that a piece of fish for the pet remained untouched. The merchant was very tired and wanted only one thing, to get home as soon as possible and get into his cozy bed. But the concern for the cat tormented the man's soul. Joe had no idea where the land might be. The man walked around the entire area around the shopping malls, and then continued his search in the park across the street. Finally tired, Joe got behind the wheel of his car, deciding to slowly drive around the entire area and explore the places where, in his opinion, a quick-witted animal could hide. It was getting dark outside when the merchant noticed a small ball of wool lying on the side of the road. Joe stopped to examine the find, which turned out to be a wounded man from the land, who was curled up and breathing hard next to the road. The man froze in horror when the unfortunate pet turned its head in his direction, and the look of the weakened animal seemed to beg for help. Joe guessed that the cat must have been run over by a car, and he barely had the strength to crawl away from the roadway. The merchant carefully put the sushi in his jacket and took it to the car. After finding out the address of the nearest veterinarian, Joe rushed there without delay. Unfortunately, it was already late and the veterinary clinic was closed. The man almost burst into tears, not knowing how to help the little cat, who became almost his family. Fortunately, friends on the phone suggested to the dealer the address of the round-the-clock veterinary service, which was quite far away. And Joe, on the way there, thought only about one thing: whether he would make it to the place before the injured pet bled out. The veterinarians agreed to take Joe with the animal in their arms without waiting in line, as the case was an emergency. Specialists promptly examined the serious wounds on the pet's body and found that he had several broken ribs, one of which pierced his lung. That's why the baby was breathing so hard. Sushi had an emergency operation and the necessary medications were administered, after which one of the specialists told Joe to go home without a pet, which should remain under their supervision. If, after all that has happened, the cat survives this night, then he will have a very good chance of getting out. The veterinarian regretfully added that the risk of death of the animal is quite high. The next day, Joe asked a relative to work for him in the store, and he himself, trying not to think about the bad things, went to the veterinary clinic. The veterinarian was relieved to report that Sushi survived, but he is still in intensive care under IVs, as the animal's condition remains severe. Fortunately, the pet's immunity was quite strong, so in the next few days the condition of the cat improved significantly. Sushi was always happy and meowed softly when Joe visited him at the clinic. When the cat was able to eat solid food on his own, the merchant brought him some selected pieces of the most delicate fish from the shop, and Sushi ate delicious treats with pleasure. A few days later, the pet was ready to be discharged, but the poor thing did not have her own home. Then the clinic staff decided to send the cat to the nearest shelter for homeless animals. However, Joe became so attached to Sushi during this time that he did not want to let the baby go to the nursery and decided to take him home. Of course, the pet really liked his new cozy home next to a kind man who not only fed him deliciously, but also saved his life. Joe bought a lot of toys for his new friend, but most of all he loved a small leaf and a funny squeaker fish.